Well, hello and welcome to class. It's LDR814 Week 5 assignments, and although Tom Cruise may need to wear shades, I certainly don't. Dr. Greg Parsons, and we are going to be moving into a new set of theories. These are called the situational or sometimes contingency models of leadership. And although the theories don't necessarily follow in a chronological order, we can trace some of the theories back to earlier times and then subsequently see development of further theories that more or less build upon those. Sometimes things kind of get out of order because people in different areas are working on things that turn out to be related to things that other people were working on, but they weren't aware of it. And one of the things that happens with what we call the literature is the literature at a certain period of time may be relatively restricted because there aren't a lot of journals available for people to publish in. So people may end up having to write a book about their particular ideas. And this was particularly true in the early days of management and leadership research, that there was no place to publish the work. And so what we'll be looking at here, I call the early contingency theories of leadership, the people who first started proposing these particular ideas. And then next week we'll be looking at later theories and additional theorists who picked up on this idea and developed their own studies and added to the body of literature. The discussion question for this week is going to involve the contingency theories that we'll be reading about in the literature that's been provided. And I'd like you to not just simply describe what the theories are and what the articles say, but interpret from your own perspective and based upon what we already know about trait leadership theories and behavioral leadership theories, which seem to be the ones that are going to propel the field into the future, into the next round of theories and approaches towards leadership. So I'm asking you to put a little bit more, rather than simply review the articles, a little bit more in terms of interpretation and synthesis of the main ideas that are being presented through these articles. And this leads really into the next topic I'd like to discuss. And this has to do with the idea of bodies of literature and streams of literature. And I've used this before in several different classes, so you may be familiar with this. But it's always a good idea to kind of review how this process works and why we look at the literature in a particular field the way we do. And if we go back and we talk about management theory, okay, where we are with regards to how we think managers should run their organizations, well, we normally trace this back to the times of Frederick Taylor and his scientific management theory, and the other authors and researchers in what's called the classical field of management research. Fayol and Weber should be familiar names. Those have also been mentioned again in this class as related to the idea of leadership. Mary Parker Follett instituted the era of human relations theories of management, and of course Mayo in the Hawthorne studies, and Herbert Maslow with Abraham Maslow with the needs theory, the hierarchy of needs. And then we moved into general systems theories with Miller and Kenneth Boulding, Herb Simon, and finally into the contingency theories of management, and Lawrence and Lorsch and others were involved in this particular stage. So by the time we end up into the emptying into the Gulf of Mexico, we have a lot of contributions that have occurred to what we call the field of management over the years. And if we tried to take the entire field and study it, it would just be too huge. So we have to kind of focus in. And what happens is, over a period of time, as more and more people contribute to a particular field, they start drawing in ideas from various areas. So, for example, Maslow, with his hierarchy of needs, established kind of a tributary feeding into the field of management. So he proposed his idea that certain needs need to be met before other needs become motivators. People need to feel like they can survive and that they have something to eat before you can motivate them with something else. And this led to Alldorfer's ERG theory and the Max Neef theories, Hertzberg's satisficers and motivator concepts of different styles of motivation, Murray systems of needs, Juan Antonio Lopez, and so a whole series of people, and of course Douglas McGregor with his Theory X and Theory Y, all contributed again to the field of management from a different perspective, or they added into it from the field of psychology and motivation. So as you can see, things start to get large in terms of the amount of literature that can be contributed to a particular field. Another way to look at this, rather than as a river, and what in some cases makes more sense, is as a tree, where the tree has roots. Okay, so contingency theory and management has the roots of classical management theory and human relations theory and systems theories. And it also has branches which came afterwards, where theories were based upon contingency theory, like SWOT analysis, the idea of the importance of organizational culture in management, leadership theories, game theory and strategy theories, global management theories, and of course stakeholder theories. Okay. But again, these are huge areas on their own, and after being in vogue or in play for 20 or 30 years, they've got their own huge body of literature. And so you have to break it down from there. So for example, for stakeholder theories, which was developed by Freeman as kind of the instigator of this theory, well, over the years, more and more people have contributed to this field using stakeholder theory as a basis of investigating various aspects of organizational behaviors and strategies and different approaches to solving problems. And as you can see, a number of authors have become prominent in the field also, based upon the original concept of stakeholder theory. So what does this all mean when it comes to leadership and what we're trying to do in this class? Well, the first thing that's important to do is to distinguish the difference between a body of literature and what we call a stream of literature. A body of literature is going to be based upon a huge body of information that's been published about a particular subject. In the social sciences, because we're dealing with human beings, whether it be sociology or psychology or business or health science administration, generally they form around a particularly well accepted foundational theory. For example, in strategy, Michael Porter's 5 forces theory has provided the basis of a body of literature. In leadership, Bass's transformational leadership theory has created a body of literature around that particular leadership style. In economics, Friedman's efficient markets theory created a whole school of economics related to that. So at some point there was an initial idea which then collected interest, seemed like it made sense given the knowledge of the time and the way the world was established. So over the next years, more people start writing about it, and it begins to collect a lot of articles, and they may be coming from different fields. So we'll see in management that people write from the field of organizational behavior, or they write from the field of social psychology. The same thing's true in leadership, as we see a lot of the authors, a lot of the more notable contributors are coming from the field of psychology. After the body of knowledge, the theory has been around long enough, it may split off and establish new schools of thought. Okay. So for example, in psychology, well, psychology started out as just a study of, how we thought people behaved and what their thinking was, but over time that became areas of, you have the Freudian psychologists, and you have the Jungian psychologists, and you have the clinical psychologists, and you have the abnormal psychologists, and you have all types of various subgroups that are broken off. And in the end, when you go in and you do a search on the amount of literature that's available, you'll find millions of related published articles. So the question is, how do you go from too many down to the right amount when you're trying to choose a particular thing to write about, when you start thinking about a research topic? And that requires working in a stream of literature. A stream of literature starts with a theory, but then takes it down a particular path, narrows it down into a particular aspect of that theory that is related to what the researcher or the student's interest is. So you don't try to take everything and talk about everything. You take one particular aspect of a theory or of the literature, and you start following that particular stream and ignore the other things. So you're going to only explore the literature that's related to a particular aspect of the theory that you're interested in. And you're going to focus on creating specific terms, that's where there's an agreement in the terms, and that the literature tends to focus down on a particular topic. And this is part of the researching process, preparing for a dissertation, where you find a specific enough area where there's a logical gap in the research where you can start to contribute to the literature. But you have to know the field, first of all, and that's why when you're concentrating on leadership as your major field, you should know a lot about different theories that are presented. Even though you may end up working with only one theory, there's got to be a general awareness of all the literature that's been done. You may not have read it all, but you should be aware of who the major theorists are, the schools or universities where the work is being done in the past, and kind of what we're doing in this class. We're starting to create a general awareness of where leadership research started, who are the major contributors, and from here you can then focus on specific areas. Now, as you move forward, suppose you're thinking of how you would do a literature review. You got to think about how the literature that you're working with, how it's going to lead to a particular research gap. So you need to understand where you're going to start, where the foundational literature is, how much related literature you're going to be working with, and when you decide to leave something out, why are you leaving it out, or why are you including it? And then you want to figure out how narrowly you're going to be focusing down. Generally, students start out too wide and don't narrow down their literature, so you'll see that when I write in your papers that you're not focusing down on a subject and you've picked something that's too broad to really cover thoroughly. And then you want to see what the latest research is that's been done recently. And then you have to decide why the literature that you're including in what you call your stream of literature, why it's there. What's the rationale behind why a particular article or group of articles or point of view is being presented? How does it lead to the topic that you want to work with? When you write it up, as you're doing in your papers, you have to tie it together. Simply telling me that this article said this, or this theory is this, and then here's another one, and here's another one, is not tying things together. It's not synthesizing the literature to find commonalities and differences that explain where the field is going. Okay, so you have to kind of tell a story using the literature. The story is yours, but you're supporting it with the literature from the peer-reviewed journals. Okay, let's walk through this one more time with pictures. Okay, so we're working in leadership, and even now we begin to see that there's a lot of different leadership theories out there. So we start out with a general awareness of literature. So there'll be leadership theories in the area of the great man theory, then we talk about the traits theories, and then we talk about the behavioral theories. We're working with the contingency theories now. Then if you move forward, you'd find the transactional theories and the transformational theories and servant theories, authentic theories, responsible theories. So there's a whole hundreds of leadership theories, all with their own special. Some of them are very similar to each other, but some of them are very different from each other. So you have to start out with a general awareness of what's out there, but now you can't talk about everything because you're going to focus down. So as we go through our funnel, we end up saying we're going to work on something called leadership competency theory. Okay, out of this whole group of theories, we're going to end up with this. So now that we've focused down, how are we going to develop our stream of literature related to competency theory? And if you trace the literature back on competency theory, you see that it originated with trait theory and behavioral theories. Okay. That's where the idea of competencies comes from. And the authors in that area were Ralph Stockdale, White, McClellan, Bentz, Boyance, all wrote about these particular topics and began to consolidate these theories around into what now is called leadership competency theories. And these are some of the authors that work in that particular area. So you notice we started out with all these theories And we chose the one we wanted to work with, and now all we're interested in doing is narrowing it down and showing how we got from the earlier theories to the competency theories. And then as we move forward, we're only going to be working with literature that deals with leadership competencies. Now we want to determine how narrowly the literature stream is going to be focused. So now we have to start thinking, what's the actual topic we're interested in? And you decided, for example, that you want to see how the relationship between competencies theory with leadership styles, if there's a relationship there, and how that relationship might be explained. So now you've even narrowed it focused it down more narrowly, and now you're looking for literature that's related specifically to competencies and their effect on a leader's ability to execute a particular style. All right, so we've gone again from the whole world of all the different leadership theories down to only the literature now that tells us what has been written about the relationship between competencies and particular style. And then step 7, finally, we got to tie the literature together. There has to be a theme that connects the foundational literature up to the more modern literature and directs it into specifically the topic that you want to be working with. So, as I've told many of you, you need to tighten up and more strongly define the thesis statement, which says exactly what you're trying to do. Okay? So, for example, in this case, we might say this particular stream, our competencies leadership stream, will show that leadership competencies theory provides a proven model for determining specific demonstrated attributes of leaders. Then you're going to build the flow from the earlier literature to the current literature that provides one leg of the support for your research question. And the research question is going to be, is there a relationship between leadership competencies theories and leadership styles of transactional and transformational leadership? Now, in terms of the actual hypotheses that you might be working with within a dissertation or in a particular study, this will be refined even further and more narrowly defined. But this is the general idea, how we've gone from a very broad view of leadership in general down to a specific leadership theory, and then we've tailored our selection of literature to fit the particular topic that we want to work with. But eventually you have to come up with a thesis statement which defines what exactly it is you're trying to do, and then that helps you decide what literature needs to be used to provide evidence that this is a reasonable area of research and will add something to the field. Okay, so when you're constructing a stream of literature, you know about the research topic, you know about the literature that's available, and then you investigate the existing research and start developing your stream. And that's what you should be doing, thinking of in your papers for the class. It's going to be iterative, meaning when you're working with this, you'll find literature that may pull you down a different path. You'll find things that you didn't realize were there in the first place, and you find them more interesting. So it's not usually that you know exactly what you're going to do before you start, but you learn where you want to go as you move down the path. And of course, the more you learn, not only do you learn more, but the more you find out that you don't know as much as you thought you did. A lot of times I'm presented with dissertation topics similar to these here. She says, I'm going to write my dissertation on latte sizes. Actually, that would be a possibility, but it would have to be defined a little bit more narrowly. And here we have a dissertation on Baywatch, and even though it's in the Department of Marine Biology, probably not an appropriate dissertation topic. So, we're winding up past the halfway point of the class, and by now you should have a pretty good idea about the structure of the class and what we're going to be looking for and what I want you to do, so that when I review your papers, some of the things that I'm saying here will probably show up as comments on your rubric or within the paper itself. I'm not looking for simply a review or a summary of the articles. I'm looking for an analysis, an interpretation, a synthesis that ties things together and tells a new story about what the literature is saying. Now I realize that dealing with journal articles, especially a lot of journal articles, takes time, and I've made some suggestions about how you can kind of shortcut by reading the abstracts and reading maybe the conclusions to get an idea whether you really need to spend a lot of time with that particular article. And even if you find one idea, it can become a source within your paper because that particular idea is important. You don't have to know everything the person said. So yes, I know it's going to take more time, and we all lose a little sleep over some of these issues. But on the other hand, we're more than halfway through the class, and it's time to kick back and enjoy the holiday weekend. So, until next time, goodbye and good luck.